thank you very much for all the inputs and for this discussion. We are heading towards the end of the event, so we'll have our final discussion dedicated to empowering innovations through strategic M&A. I would like to invite the moderator, Albuquerque, from GenIbet, a company from the Recipharm group, and also our speakers, Filipe Duarte from Novo Nordisk, José Maçãs from Deloitte, and Vera Moura from Basinnov. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation by PBio. Thank you very much for my colleague panelists to be here and are open to share your experiences. And thank you very much for you that are still here to share with us your doubts, your questions, and to, at the end of the day, to listening to us. So, the objective of this panel is to talk about empowering innovation through strategic M&A. And the first question I would like to discuss with you and to have your thoughts on would be the motivations and drivers behind the M&A. And here I think we have two perspectives. One is from the startups and the other one is from corporates. I will start with Vera because she has both experiences, and so please share with us what first, I think, from the startup perspective and then from the company.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the invitation and to select me to speak about this subject, even though I have never gotten into the stage of a merge or acquisition, but I did the process. And it's very, it was very nice. I think the word is agreeable. It was nice. It was amazing to do a journey in a startup developing a new cancer treatment from the very beginning until setting up the clinical trials. This was my journey in the startup. I was CEO for 10 years, even though in the first years I did not feel capable of doing so. So I went to work in a TTO. I went to gather the team that I needed, the funds to start, and it took me 3 years until I felt like I was capable of leading the startup with the vision that we heard in the previous session, the vision to sell, the vision to develop and put something, or trying to put something in the market. So my vision as a startup, being in a startup about merge and acquisition, is to start very early to know your market, to get acquainted with the competition, your position, what is being done in the clinics, if you are, of course, in this field. How is the patient journey? How is the disease that you are tackling being addressed everywhere, in different countries, in the world? Because in this field, your product will be a global product. So if you do this from the very beginning, then you can put yourself in the shoes of the ones that will use your product, and you will know what to say when you have an investor, when you have the opportunity to merge, to be acquired, to license your technology, whatever the exit strategy is. So having this knowledge from the very beginning is the driver from the startup, and will answer the questions to the other side, because now I'm in a company, I'm in a Basinnov, it's the innovation branch of a pharmaceutical group, the FHC group, Portuguese pharma group, that is doing this journey to licensing technologies and also possibly to acquire a startup or to merge in the future maybe. And what we look for is this: give us the difference, give us the benefits that you will add to us. So basically, I don't want to take too much of my colleagues' time, but in a nutshell, it's this. When you are in a startup, you have to think globally so that you will understand what you want from your business and how you will position your business and what you will look for when you come towards an investor or an opportunity to merge or to be acquired by someone. And in the industry side, you need that vision from whom you are contacting with, because sometimes you don't know what is the potential of the person, the company that is in front of you.
Can the investing company, what can the investing company apport and bring to the startup? The startup usually it's only searching for capital or something more.
If you are starting, sometimes you don't know what you want. You want the money and that's it, because you know the science that you need to do. But you need much more than that. You need the smart money. You all know the expression. You need that because you need guidance. You need also someone that sees the potential that you didn't see in your product. So you need the investor that will believe in your product, that will expand your product, that will provide you what you cannot do anymore. Because, if you had the intelligence and the audacity to start, to develop, to create, to prove, it comes to a point where it's like in the desert. It comes to a point where you need an oasis because you have done so much. So you need the investor to bring you more than just money, to scale up even what you think your product could be. So this is what you want. You want someone that puts money in you, but at that stage that also takes you by the hand and says, let me show you how much we can do with your product. And that is science, that is market, there are opportunities, it's networking, it's scale.
Filipe, and what can the buyers bring to the startups in a process of merger and acquisition?
Let's say from a corporate point of view, and I work in a big corp, Novo Nordisk, and I would say normal we follow strategy. For us, when we look to a startup or whatever kind of industry, we know exactly what we want. And it's something that is a gap, we could say is a gap on our capabilities in terms of capacity for produce anything to the market, or is a lack or something, a gap on our pipeline. And we know exactly what we want. Most of the times we say, this is what we need based on our strategy, and we will try to find that. And then is the question, when we found the asset or the IP, the technology, we need to decide what we want. Depends of the stage of the development. We will probably start by maybe do some collaboration, make some investment, and let the startup or the small company to develop a bit more. But at the end of the day, we want that in-house. Because we want to control, and we know how to develop, how to scale it. And in the previous panel, they talk about scalability. That is one of the key elements, is scalability. Can we scale it to the market that we know that exists? Maybe the startup, they believe that they have a certain market. Sometimes they believe that the market is bigger, but we know exactly the market, our market. We know all the information. Then we say, okay, this is your product. Let's try to do collaboration, and license or acquisition. And I think the model will always be dependent on the stage, on the collaboration. If we have the competence in-house, or if we don't have the competence in-house for develop, we may say, okay, please continue the development, and we'll talk in 1 year or 2 years on the next round of development. But as a big corp, at the end of the day, we want the product in-house because we want to have the control. That, no matter what, that is what the big corporate wants.
What is the major advantage that a company as yours could bring to the startup? It's more on the selling side, selling the product, it's in the market, or it's more technology?
I would say, in early stage, what we try to do is collaborate. We will support our knowledge, maybe give some guidance if they're already on try to define a clinical trials. We'll tell, okay, how you need to prepare clinical trials, or what you need to do before we go on clinical trials. We'll share our knowledge. We'll kind of work as a consultant to them, because we have all the interest to them to have success, and we'll share and we'll provide all the support. You'll have access to all kind of resources from in terms of R&D, legal, finance. We'll give that because we have interest on that. That is what we can bring to the table, is all kind of support, because it's a win-win situation at the end of the day. We don't want to invest. If we believe that is a technology will give us some benefit, we'll try to make sure that they will succeed, because then we'll succeed. That is kind of the collaboration that we do is not just capital, it's also resources. It's kind of knowledge that I think probably sometimes has higher value than just bring capital, because have access to a network of 10,000 R&D network, then I think that there is no price on that.
If I understood well, in the majority of cases where you invest, it's you that find the startup and not the reverse.
I think we have a mix. As a Novo Nordisk, I work on the Novo Nordisk company that put the products on the market, and then we have Novo Holdings, Novo Foundation. They have a different purpose. Novo Foundation is just investment. Novo Holdings works as a VC, private equity. That is approach. But us as a big company, I know we bit lost on the question, but we try to look what we want and say, this is our target way to go. Of course, we go all kind of scientific events, and sometimes there are opportunities that we were not aware, and small companies, suddenly they contact us, say, okay, we may have something that can fit your strategy, because our strategy is public, and sometimes we receive this call saying, maybe there is opportunity, and sometimes we don't know that the company will exist.
In that sense, that other people could understand, how can they know what you are searching for?
Yeah,
and,
we as a trade company, it's public, what is our strategy, what is our goals, and is well defined the segments. Any small company, startup that see, okay, I have a product that could fit that strategy, they will have opportunity to talk with us. Because we see, okay, there is a potential there, a potential to benefit us, and we will have a discussion. And we are quite open to talk and discussion with any kind of company. We don't make a selection, so it's a startup, we will not talk with them. Sometimes they have the best ideas and the best projects.
Very much. Regarding the selection process, and now, José Luís, I would like to hear you in this. What should the startups seek in their selection process? And how is this different according to their objectives? Which characteristics should the startup company look for on the potential buyers when the driver is to promote innovation and value creation?
And thank you, Anna. And thank you also to PBio and to Filipe for the invite. Maybe this is a really good segue also, the scouting part that you were discussing with Filipe, how it gets there. So you can get it through, if you have a vehicle that is a CVC on a big corp that is targeting, if you are approached, or if you have more strategic targets, like eventually the team led by Filipe is doing. So that's quite interesting. And then also in terms of why does startups look for buyers, right? Which are the different pathways? So they might really look for an exit. They might look for an exit because they are a platform and they're looking for the next big thing. They might look just for equity and support to continue growing and to be acquired as well as a team. Or they might have actually 2-3 different portfolios and they want to divest something that is not their core. So that's basically how they're getting there. Related to the different processes and how do you get value from it, right? I think that was more the question that you were going to now. I would split it maybe into 3 parts, right? As you have the opportunities being via partnership or by a direct investment or by a direct acquisition, you have eventually to be very clear to the market what are you basically selling. So are you really like more focused on therapeutic areas? Are you more focused on services platforms? Do you have a technology? Do you have a platform? Right? So, and in that spectrum, you can move between you're really into services, you have fees as a service, etc., or you're more into an asset and out licensing, or you really like you have in-house everything, a little bit of R&D, a little bit of product development. And spanning through that gives you the perspective of what is your business model, what is the type of partnership or acquisition you're looking for. So, but be very clear about your business model, which is the spectrum you are in, right? And maybe what you have is actually not a product, it's something that can be a platform and that can be much more fast in the go-to-market than being just focusing on a TPP, right? So business model matters at the start to create value and to be clear to your potential acquirers. Then maybe second, I would look more into what are your revenue streams? So what are you really selling? Who are you selling to? And how is the organization that you want to set up or it is already set up? So, because that will give you a really good view on what are my revenue streams in terms of services, in terms of products, in terms of markets, in terms of also the organization, margins, how do I get reimbursement or not, in which regions, what am I going for in terms of supply chain, in terms of shared service, support services, or am I much more lean and just focus on an asset or something? So, but be clear on the market, on the product and the organization, because that will explain to people like Filipe or people like Vera what they're getting into. And then finally, I would move into, especially around the creation of value, you need to tell a value story to your investors or to your acquirers. That's valid for the previous discussion on the VCs and maybe even more valid here. So they will buy the core. They know exactly what you have, the technology that you have or the asset that you have, but you need to tell them a little bit, okay, I can do more. I have an adjacency here that I can explore. And together with you, I can explore that. And that will bring you more value. And that's, it's not about the multiples, it's really about the story that you're telling in terms of the value that you bring. And then finally, you need to move from the core and the adjacencies to the future vision. And if the future vision is just to tap into synergies of the buyer, if that's what you want to do as a target, or if you just want to be acquired to have like commercial R&D, better skills, make sure that that's also on your future vision, because that will also pace if you're just getting like a minor equity investment, or if you have a full investment and you sell everything, but you are integrated into a new business. So maybe I would go through the paths of why you engage in the M&A process that we revisited, and then how do you tell the value story through the business model, the revenue streams, and the core adjacents, future vision. What actually you're trying to sell?
If I can add something here, I think when you say about great value, I think if you are looking for a partnership, I think it's extremely important that you be clear with your story. What can you bring on the table? What can you do more? And you need to, in a way, say, okay, we have the competences. We have a team that can do this, that we are discussing here, but we can do more. That is in a partnership. What we are looking is not what the asset that you have. We look, okay, can that team develop that? We have this kind of, we also do that partnerships where we interact with all kind of companies. also with companies with AI. That, you mentioned before to not use the word AI, but we need to believe when it's a partnership, when we are putting money on the table, we need to believe that the team the other side can deliver that. That is important to create value, and your value can really raise your value if you have a competent team. Of course, if your team already been across multiple big companies, have a good track, that will help a lot. I think for partnerships, it's extremely important that you are surrounded by talent. If you are on license, it's about where you want to sell the license. Do you want to sell the license for a specific region and then you want to keep the rights for yourself? Or you want to say, I think was mentioned before from David, to keep the assets as close as possible. I think it was not the asset, but from the La Caixa panelists before. If that is your approach to keep the value with you, you can always try to go in a partnership or sell or have a license to sell some rights, but you still keep something to you to support your next assets, next research, or any expansion. If you are in a way, say, okay, we want to just sell this to focus, and sometimes this also happens. A company says, okay, we have this portfolio on this specific area. In our case, we are always focused on type 2 diabetes, obesity, metabolism. Then you say, a company say, we don't want to work on this, we'll sell it and focus on the other one. And also you have this clarity, as you mentioned, José, is quite important. And once the other side also have that in mind. And another thing on value was Stefan mentioned about be ready to sell it. I'm on the side of buying, on the side to assess and make a recommendation, this makes sense or not. And we see a difference when is a person just selling, just a person that is, let's say, experienced on sales, or a person from R&D. In our specific case, we prefer the R&D people. We don't like salespeople, because we always say what they are trying to pitch us is a dream. And we like more data. But this is the difference between a big corp and a VC or private equity. That is, you also need, your value depends when you talk with someone, you need to know what is your audience, and you need to understand that from the other side, they have a strong team and they have unlimited resources to check you.
You spoke about sales person, sales capabilities, and tech capabilities. Which other capabilities are important to the startup to have in order to be able to succeed in merger and M&A process?
Where you can start.
The due diligence process is excruciating. So the capabilities that they need to have is endurance and be prepared from the very beginning. The thing that I said about thinking of what you are developing from a very, very early stage is crucial, because you need to look at your product not just from an R&D perspective or the regulatory pathway that you need to follow everywhere. So don't forget any step, but do not forget the business. Do not forget the market, not forget to update. So you really need a team before you go into M&A. You need to have a team that is capable of doing your finances, is capable of doing your marketing plan, your positioning, how you position yourself in the market, in the clinic, whatever you are entering into, so that when you face your future, you would be prepared. And even then, you will have so much information that is required from you in a few hours that you really need to be capable of, I would say, not even sleeping. Because if you take too long showing what you have, showing what is being asked from you, it's not what the other part wants. from you. So they want you to be, if you are contacting them because you have something valuable, you need to have the full story. And sometimes you think that only your data is enough. That your data, imagine you have something that works for cancer, which is my field, so you compare yourself with the untreated control. Your control is the untreated group. I mean, this cannot be. You need to know which is the first line of treatment. You have to have data for that. And then you need to have data regarding not just the first line of treatment, because you will never be the first line. When you apply, you need to also know what is the second line, whatever. And if you have data on that, even better. So, because you need to show why is it worth to invest? How much of the market will you take on? And you need to convince the part that you are approaching. You need to have the data. And if you haven't started thinking like this from the very beginning, then in a due diligence, you will easily disappoint the part that you are trying to impress. So be prepared, have a mentor, have a multidisciplinary team, go to conferences, talk to people, ask about the value, please value the failures of others, because they will tell you what was missing. And this is something that we don't do in Portugal. And we have a lot of cases on that, so we could really thrive on that. But be prepared, and don't be afraid to fail in a first approach with these guys. Because they will tell you what you don't have and what you need to have, and then you go back and you do your homework. And for the first thing that you are developing, maybe that you have to see and accept that, okay, this was a learning opportunity. On my second research, maybe with another team or a more complete team, I will put together my universe to come up again and meet these guys, myself now, but I'm not at their size. But you will, then the researcher will come to us, and they will have a full story. And even then, more questions will arise. So endurance, resistance, resilience also, but resistance.
Maybe very, very shortly, and given we don't have a lot of time, maybe dropping some names that you can actually investigate different paths. So the question from Anna, I guess that the skills that a startup needs to have and needs to display, it has also to do a lot with the sale path that you're looking for. And if you look into selling to a private equity because you have a platform already, or because you have CRO, CDMO capabilities, you can tap not only into PE world, you can also tap into company portfolios of PEs. If you think about, and that's a dropping name, examples, I didn't work in any of those 3 deals, so I can talk about them. So Fair Journey, for instance, it was already, before the Partners Group transaction, the one that came to the market now and was mentioned on the previous panel, was already with a PE before, from London. So how did they get there, right? So a PE is very demanding. When Vera talks about the DD, a DD for a strategic like Filipe or a DD for a PE is very different in terms of what they request, the demands that they have, right? Filipe will be more focused as a strategic, more focused on the technology, the capabilities, the synergies that it has in the portfolio, and etc. The PE will be much more focused on how can I turn around this business, how can I flip it in 6-7 years at least, or even earlier, right? There's some PEs with a long-term investment practice, but most of them will look for that, right? So none of them is wrong, but it's very different to sell to a PE than to a strategic. When you look in selling into a strategic, you're looking into, either you're looking into licensing or really selling your company, or making sure your engineers and yourself as a leader move and get integrated and get retained, and it's a success story inside another business. or you just exit and you give it to the market. If you look into Seller Labs or other examples, you sell to a big strategic, right? Or if you talk about all the deals that Filipe and the team has done in Novo Nordisk. How you display there, the skills that you need to have to display the technology, the information, and already if you have clinical trials data, it's very different from what you've done just for the PE, right? And then finally, there's a third path, right? It's not only about selling, there's other things that you can do. You can actually list. You can list in Europe, you can do dual listing, you can actually list in the US. So if you look at the example of not Portuguese, but with some Portuguese IDN, Moonlight Therapeutics, Immunotherapeutics, they listed directly, right? So there's different ways, and the level of advice and support that you need to get, I'm not going to sell here my services, but it's like if you go for an IPO, it's completely different. So you need some support, some advice, yes, for the sell side cycle, but if you decide to go listing, and it might be the right thing for you to do depending on your platform or your portfolio of assets, it's a very different set of skills as well. So when you think about, yes, DD is difficult, yes, you need to prepare a bunch of things, but the way you go to a PE, to a strategic, or to capital markets is very different, excluding VC that we already touched earlier.
I think just build on your saying, José, regarding why not go to the market. There's a couple of cases of companies that they start by thinking, okay, should we sell it or not? And then they decide, okay, maybe we can create value, go to the market, and then sell it after. There is a case that was, the company was just acquired by Pfizer 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. They start the year by, went into the a conference, presenting, okay, our data, clinical data, phase 1, going close to go phase 2. They approach a couple of companies, decide, okay, let's discuss if there is an opportunity for M&A. They realized, no, we can create more value and go to the market. They went to the market. 6 months after, their value increased 30%, and they just sell the company to Pfizer. In, let's say, 9 months, they double their value. That, of course, this is not a Portuguese market, this is US market, but just to give an example, there is different ways you can create value. If you really have a product that you believe that has value, and you see that there are, from a private equity or big companies are trying to look into you, you can take that approach. You can really generate value, high value, in a short period of time if you do the right moves. Maybe for that you need to advise from consultant, José is from Deloitte, you need this kind of advice because you need their way, their tactics or their strategy, how to navigate around this. That is the way. Now to be prepared for M&A. Depends what you want. If it's a private equity, the sales approach, because you need to show to the VC or private equity that they will be able to generate 4 or 5 times what they are investing. That is one way of doing. As for a company like us, a big corp, we focus on the technology, on the asset, then we will ask for all kind of data. And we probably, as a big corporation, we bring all kind of resources, no matter if it's a small company or a big company, and that can be a big problem for a small company. You need to be prepared to provide data quite fast. And if you also do a competition in terms of you are contacting multiple companies at the same time to increase your value, then you need to be ready to deliver data. And data is the most important. And you also need to have in mind that everyone will check the data. If they will if they are in doubt, they will ask for more data. They can do the modeling of your data and then say, we don't believe on this data. Maybe they will tell you, okay, we'll stop now and we'll look into you again. Let's discuss in 6 months, on 1 year. We do these kind of things that we look into 2, 3, 4 times to the partner, say, let's show us the data. Let's wait 6 months. Let's check again the data 1 year after, or 2 years. Because at the end of the day, what we are buying is not a dream. We need to be confident that when we are investing, the likelihood of success is high. We know that can fail, but we try to minimize the risk. That means data is the most important for a big corporation. You need to have a good data, and you need to have a team from yourself or a consultant that can explain and provide the data on the right way, on the right time.
From my experience at GenIbet, that was acquired by Recipharm in 2022, we need to have very good data before, so we need to be prepared to answer the questions, to open our books, to have everything done. But is not that didn't stop there. After the operation is closed, the demand for more data and for reporting is huge. And so it's a first step to your future life after selling a part or all the company. Would you see advantages when you compare, or can people decide between M&A or PE or VC, or what is your advice on this?
I think depends what the company wants, what the startup wants. If you want to still keep as an independent company, if you want to develop, of course, if you only have one asset, when we say one asset is one project, one product, then probably the best strategy is try to get as much as possible and move to another one. If you have a startup with work in multiple areas, then the strategy needs to be completely different. And if you say, okay, I want to get more, get someone to invest on us, and then maybe do a license of these assets, and then continue with the other ones, and then do a license for another one that you are growing through license. And there is plenty of companies doing that. They develop, they do the R&D, they make a proof of concept, and they license that, and they can really generate good money on that. A good case, Danish company is called GenMap. Is well known. I think their value on the stock is quite high, and what they do is they develop and do the license. They don't produce anything. They don't bring anything to the market. They only do R&D. And that is their way, their model. We develop, we license, or do a partnership, and we move to the next one. If a startup wants that, probably, or work with a good private equity fund that has a track on doing that, or do a partnership with the big pharma on that sector, or a big tech on that sector. And it's quite normal. You have a startup or biotech working with all kind of companies, which their companies are competitors between them. But they say, okay, this asset is mine, the other asset is from the other company, and there is no problem on that. No one believes on the risk of sharing information or trade secrets, because they know, okay, everyone has their different assets. If the startup wants to grow, then don't go on M&A. Do partnership, do license, get a good partner. If you want to move to another area, then do M&A.
Yeah, I think if you enter a partnership, you need to have an exit in mind always as well. So whatever you're trying to do here in terms of growing the business or getting some equity, etc., you need to have a view in mind of what is your exit play, if it's really to integrate the business or do an exit and make it clean. I believe the business model will answer a lot of the questions for you, because, for instance, if you have a platform, a PE will be very interested. If you have just a target, if you just have an asset, eventually you need to go big corp strategic. So that will tell you also where to go. And then you don't have much control because what you will be thrown at in terms of opportunities will be different. But if you could have some decision, some control, do you want to have a future in that business? Or as the example that Filipe was mentioning, you have other revenue streams, you have other portfolios, and you want to keep doing those, and you're just divesting something that is, at this point, might be core for you, but it's really a good point to exit. So I think the moment, the maturity of the portfolio, what is the business model, will answer a lot of those things for you. You being, for instance, in the deal with Recipharm, you know what it means to be working in a transaction that it is a bit of strategic, but it has a PE behind. So it's a really interesting mix, and I think it's one of the best stories that we have also in Portugal to tell, right? But when you went and told that story, and you can tell it much better than me, is you had an international angle, you already had a pipeline, right? So you had already something to show to the buyer. So eventually you could decide, do I want to stay in this business as a core because I see that it has potential? So we go back again to, I have a core, an adjacency, maybe I have a future vision and I want to get into that with the investor. But the business model and what you have as a portfolio, how are you going to make revenue? Which are the streams? Will already give you a lot of the answers if you should go private equity, VC, or strategic. One last thing. When you look into transactions of this kind of startups and biotechs, beyond pharma as well, right? If you go to any other of the other sectors in terms of blue economy, in terms of industries, in terms of food, nutraceuticals, you normally go through different steps. Sometimes you have the first discussion with a VC. Later on, you're actually in a meeting board of a CVC from a big corp. And only when you get to a certain maturity, you actually start discussing PEs, listing versus strategic acquirers. So sometimes you do almost all the steps through your journey. So it's not like a one take. It's a huge journey. And as you mature as a company and as you get more portfolio, more sales, more markets, and you refine the way how you sell and what you sell, you will go through that journey. And it can become easily end-to-end, a partnership of R&D that turns into a CVC investment that wants to acquire you and your team. And then at a certain point, actually the CVC from a big corp is not interested in developing that portfolio anymore, and they actually take a little bit of the profit, but they help you sell that to another strategic. And we've seen that in numerous times. But from the buyer, just one last thing, from the buyer perspective, the huge mistake that is done a lot of times when buying smaller companies, and maybe Vera or Filipe, feel free to chip in, it's two things, people and CapEx. If you're investing in a business that is on the play for R&D, developing new things, bringing things that are new to market, that only that team, that team is one of the few teams in the world that know exactly what they're doing, when they get acquired or invested, make sure you put CapEx on the different lines of R&D, or else you might be killing the perfect innovator that you just acquired. People, second thing, if you don't make sure you retain financially and non-financially the team of engineers behind, you're done. You're acquiring something that is all about the people, especially if it's at an early stage. So, and if you believe that just throwing money out of it in terms of retention, that is not enough. There's people that don't want to work for a big corp or don't want to work for a PE in a 5-6 years horizon. So that's quite interesting. From a buyer perspective, you don't need to integrate fully. You can keep it at bay, arm's length, just give some support, but make sure you retain people, financial, non-financially, and make sure that you don't cut the funds for everything that is the innovation. And you would think that this is super easy and clear and obvious. You cannot tell how many times this went wrong.
I think I can get an example on people. I think a deal that, or a company that their success is only depending on the people, I think no one or big corporation will not willing to invest there. It's too risky. Because, of course, you can say, okay, you are a small company, a big company comes and buy you, and you believe, oh, okay, we'll work there. It's a completely different way of working a small company, a startup, on a big corporation. There is always a clash of culture. And we have cases that we end up not proceed because of the risk of the technology. We're too dependent on a team. And no matter how much money we would put on the table, of course, they could stay 1 year or 2 years, and then if we don't have anything internal that can continue, if we don't have the capabilities, we'll not do it. If we have the capabilities, we can say, okay, during the integration, we transferred the data, the know-how, and then we can continue. But if we don't have that, if everything depends on 5, 6, 10, 20 people, that is too risky. And then we don't know, depends on the transaction, but sometimes if a company, a startup gets, let's say, 10 million or 1 billion, we have all kind of examples. If you have a small team that, with a transaction, each of them will get $100 million. How can you keep them motivated and incentivize them to keep working when they just receive $100 million in a transaction? That is a big risk. And if you don't have a way to take the data and continue the work, probably a VC will invest, but the big corporate will not invest. The risk is too high, too high.
Is there any question from the audience upstairs?
Hi, this question is actually to Filipe. You mentioned a couple of things like competitors, pipelines. What are your thoughts about Novo Nordisk acquiring Catalent when they're actually they're all quite similar in some aspects?
That was let's say, if you look to all the transactions that we materialize in Novo, I think Catalent is exception. I think probably another 2 other a bit exceptional. But there was driven by a need for capacity. And it's public that we were already working with them, as Catalent was a CMO, probably the same case as yours. And we decided, okay, we were starting to be too dependent on them, and we saw a risk that, okay, in order for us to continue to grow, we need to invest on capacity, or we need to invest on partners. And when you start investing, at some point you realize, okay, if something happened to this partner, you have a big problem. And then comes the opportunity, okay, is there open for acquisition? Catalent was on the stock market, and then everything is on the stock market is available to buy. That is the way. And of course, was a discussion how to make sure that we would not cannibalize the CMO market. And we had to answer that to the authorities to make sure that there was more players on the market that could continue provide the service to our competitors. Otherwise, that would not be accepted by the authorities. I think it was a long process until the authorities realized, okay, there is no problem, you can sell it. And also need to make a disclaimer here, we bought the entire Catalent as the Novo Holdings, bought the entire company. Catalent still exists as a company, they provide all the service, and then Novo Nordisk, the company that I work, bought 3 specific production sites. The Catalent belongs to the Novo, let's say Novo family, but they still provide the service, and we don't kind of interact in any way to the known sites that we bought. But it was a specific case, and most of our deals are more license, partnerships, and acquisitions. I was on the audience, I just received, for instance, a message that we'll soon have another deal that will be public, but is nothing related to, it's more how to build a pipeline. Our focus is how can we secure that we have a strong pipeline? And the way we do it, all other competitors doing exactly the same. They are looking what exists on the market, no matter the stage, to secure the pipeline.
Just in addition to that question, I was working with a CMO at the time, a few months ago, that was working exactly for Novo Nordisk and Catalan. And they were developing one molecule that Novo also had. How did you deal with that in that M&A? Did you kill it? Did you acquire it? I know it's one of the tricky questions, and what M&As come up.
I think probably, if that is too specific, I cannot answer it, right? Now we keep the things completely separate. We focus, I think, our approach is not to avoid or to make sure that no one's develop other compounds. I think we develop our own compounds, and we are proud that there is a competition, and we also incentivize competition. We don't do acquisitions to destroy competition or to have a monopoly. That is not our approach. I think we can discuss outside exactly the case, but our approach, and I think no one will approve a transaction if the transaction is seen as cannibalization of the market. I think as a company on the stock market, everything is checked, and that will be the first reason for the transaction not be approved if it's seen as we are trying to avoid the competition to move forward.
There's another question here. Sorry, but I don't know who is first, so perhaps here and then.
Well, I just like to hear your thoughts more on, let's say, on a macro question. Europe, it's full of small companies, and Portugal even more. In other places, like in the US, it's more common to see smaller companies with complementary assets that are willing to merge. Like last year, more on the industrial biotech side, that's where I'm coming from, Maçãs merged with Inscripta because on one side there was industrial assets that could allow them to access the market. On the other line, a portfolio of ingredients and a pipeline. Do you think there is an opportunity to do that in Portugal? And from what you see in the Portuguese ecosystem, what would be the focus area that should be used for that? And also, you mentioned, this is a first question. The second question is, you talk a lot also about private equity. Typically, private equity companies, they are more funds, they are a lot more looking to buy EBITDA and then transform the business. What has been happening more recently is nowadays some PE players are trying to build their own complete pipelines, buying different kinds of companies, not really buying EBITDA, in some cases even buying pre-revenue companies, but combining with other companies that have power in the channel and that then can, let's say, create a big business. Do you think that this is a trend that will continue? Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on these two different questions.
I'll take the first shot. So maybe starting for the Ps, right? So Ps that have the scale. If you look at players like EQT, yes, they can have 40 to 400 biotech or around services, around medical, around health, around nutraceuticals, all in the same platform. And they have the scale. So if you have like something like that, and the case of EQT is clear because they have a fund that is very dedicated to that, then of course there's synergies between, but they're still looking at company by company, they're still looking at EBITDA, right? It's just that they manage to tell a story, because if not, it will also not be efficient. If you have, it's great to have distribution in the portfolio and to have production, But if I'm being dependent just on the production that I have, then it also doesn't work, right? But definitely, if you have that scale, if you're talking about smaller PEs, VCs, family funds, I agree with you. It's they will not be looking into assets. They will be looking eventually to things that have service as a fee, and that have a technology platform. If you think about things that can be scalable, that you don't need to have a huge investment on bioreactors, but instead you have like a different technology that it's easy, then maybe. In terms of Portugal and in terms of areas of investment, look, there's different pockets coming up right now, right? You see that the scale is small in terms of both CROs, CDMOs, and biotechs looking into therapeutic areas. What I would say is move away from the dream of you have a molecule and you go for a therapeutic area, and move much more into a platform or technology. That definitely gets you faster there.
And more money.
Yeah, but if you're looking into RNA, or if you're looking into different technologies that don't require the kind of investment of setting up like a plant or subcontracting to a CDMO with huge bioreactors, it's less expensive. Or if you do have a technology, if you do have a product that requires that, talk with players that already have those capabilities, right? You can go to Recipharm or GenIbet to do a lot of that. You can externalize. But in terms of, and I think it's a really good question, but in terms of what is trending in Portugal, I think it has much more to do with try to invest in things that already exist. So if we see a bump on CROs, if we see a bump on CDMOs, if we see that biologics is growing, so that there's investments coming up, like Blue Pharma is investing a little bit on the injectables, try to be close to those areas and pick one and try to be close to those areas. But it's difficult to be specific and say definitely going for that area.
Thank you. Yeah, the Portuguese ecosystem is not trendy on one side. So you really need to know which companies are looking for things and what are those things. Even before you start doing your research, all the companies that invest, they are very open to collaborations with academia. So if you are in academia, it's a very good position to start something with them, which they can control, which they can guide, and where they can already have ownership of the IP, shared on ownership, which is good. Remember that we are small. Bial, Pharma, the FHC group, Basinnov, we are looking for things that have a market potential, but also things that we can scale, we can leverage on our distribution channels, on our production capabilities. So what I advise here is not to go too high on doing something that, like my colleague said, requires a huge capacity, a huge development. For instance, we are approached, we support discovery in oncology and immunotherapies, and we are approached with CAR T-cell therapies. This is a very specific example, but please don't do that. CAR T-cell therapies required to get to clinical at least 10 million, at least. We will not invest in that. It's not our capability. If you want us to do that, put us in a co-investment. Put us in something with others that you have gathered, collected somewhere else, so do your homework. Be realistic. In Portugal, it is what it is. Our VCs have a limited capability. Our companies on which you can do, with whom you can merge or be acquired, they are very small, but they need to grow. So what I usually get when I'm being audited is help the auditors present a clean report. So I do not stress enough on do your homework. So help, if you want to scale, if you want to start a research, if you want to do something starting in Portugal, please know the landscape. Know who are the investors, who are the companies, what do they do, how you can help them. For instance, the FHC group is very well known by Laboratórios Basinnov. They make injectables and ointments, creams, and so on. Everything almost that you have injectable in the hospital, it comes from there. But they were acquired by the FHC group. They decided to invest in injectables in Portugal because there were very few. So they went and they bought Laboratórios Basinnov, which were they were a very small room in Coimbra. And they bought them, and they took the people and the technology to Mortágua, where they had a lot of room, and they built 2 very nice and huge facilities there. So this is a reality of what we have here. Even Bial is growing. They don't have enough room to grow, probably as much as they wanted to, but we are innovating. So be creative with your research in approaching, in Portugal, the companies that can help you grow in this therapeutic area. I think we need to think big in what our products can do, in what our science can reach, but we also need to think small enough to be successful, to approach our clients in our country, our investors, and think about the path that we need to do to go to an M&A. My vision about Portugal is not very positive, but I decided to come back to my country and take on this job position because I do believe that we can make an impact here. We just need to rephrase our minds, our speech, our research from the very beginning, and think about the ecosystem that we have to really build something from scratch that can go somewhere with what we have. And you saw the panels today. There are a lot of opportunities to make synergies. But we need to start from here, from Portugal. Or my advice would be start your work, your research, and go immediately seeking funds outside of Portugal. If you want to start with Portugal, you need to know the ecosystem. And it's not very favorable for us to make a difference.
Just
but
to add one thing, why we have been talking so much about talk with VCs and private equities. I can see in all the projects I've been involved that the small companies, have their private equity or VC associated to their ownership, or that they had some stake there. And the last years we've also been seeing especially private equity or big private equity investing on the CMOs and CROs because they saw there a potential for revenue. And I would say in these days there is probably all of the big CMOs, they have some private equity involved on their shareholders because they see opportunity. Do you have a final question, I think was that?
Thank you. I work in diagnostics, so my question may not be completely aligned to your expertise. And you know, M&As are like marriages. When you're young in a startup, you just want to have fun. You're not thinking about full-time commitment and long-term relationships. You imagine that's something that happens down the line when you're older and more mature. Meaning in my sector, you have sales. That's maturity. It just so happened that a year ago, in the middle of a conversation about getting distribution, we just suddenly were sitting down in the middle of an M&A proposal. And this is something that is very disturbing. If you're a young company that someone is proposing marriage to you, you're not ready, emotionally ready. In the end, that deal didn't come to fruition. Our expectations for life were not aligned. But the one thing that happened to us is that made us think that maybe having fun as a startup is not all good. and made us realize that maybe together, because we suffer from this problem. We are a very small company, and we suddenly start realizing as long as we're small, we're never going to go anywhere. But that is something that did happen by accident. We were trying to find a distributor for our product for one specific territory, and they tried to buy us. And the question is, what is the equivalent of the singles bar for this type of deals? You know, where do you go to be seen, to know who is on the market, what are they looking for? Because, so any words of wisdom for young startups?
I can start, but I think everyone, in our case, we have a team, their job is to look what exists on the market. And we are saying people doing pure R&D, that they go to a scientific conference, they read papers, they do all kind of this. Their job is just go through the conference, check what is there, who is presenting, and try to get ideas. That is one way of getting to know what exists. And we also get bids from banks, from consultant companies, that they follow us and they tell us, okay, maybe this is something that is interesting. And what also happened is, well, not real a startup, but also maybe from the US would be a startup approach, decide that wants to do M&A, and they approach a consultant or bank and say, we want to do M&A, and what they will do, they will reach out a couple of clients to see if there is any interest. But as a small company, if you are based on R&D, if you just go and present your work outside of Portugal, it's quite likely that there will be someone there that will be listing what you have and will check your web page or check your paper, and that information will be fed internally. And sometimes it's just someone knows your company and knows that you are looking for something, of opportunity, and that person reach out a person and another person, and that information reach out the company. You have all kind of ways to do that. But if it's your wish to go on M&A, I think you also need to be public in a way to do that and contact the channels. Otherwise, if you are public about your product, your service, if someone has a need and see that you can cover the gap, someone will call you.
It's an opportunity. It will happen as long as you are out there. So connect, network, invest in that. If your company doesn't have anyone that is capable of just going and going, or funds to go, the opportunity should come soon. But sometimes it doesn't, so you have to just keep going and make connections and be remembered. Do something, invest enough so that you would be remembered, and this network of contacts that happen without you being there, make sure that this will continue. So you make a connection, someone is impressed by you and knows someone that will be a perfect match. It's an opportunity. It's risky, and you just need to keep going. There is no miracle recipe to being noticed, so you do have to have a good marketing strategy to present your data. Well, but you know that.
Diagnostics network or product? Okay. Well, you have the typical things, right? You have MedTech Europe. That's a good forum. I recommend you to attend. It was in Lisbon this year. But then, even if you don't have the passes, or if you don't want to put the entire team inside the event, just go side events, organize something, and invite people. That's always a way. But as Filipe was also saying, you need to prepare your equity story. So you need to make sure that you get to the universe of sellers, of buyers or investors that you want to be in. And when you touch base with a bank or with a consulting firm. If you have the scale for that, they will distribute that to their wallet of contacts, and they will market you, and they will take you a retainer, and you have the then a success fee. That's the model. If you feel that you are way before that stage and you still want to go to the CVCs of the world, like going to the big medtech players, to the CVCs, not to the strategic part of the business, that's also a very good start. So depending on your maturity, if you're talking about 8-10 million revenue every year or less, maybe you want to try CVCs. If you are above that, if you have a multiple of 15 or 16 potentially because the business is a bit bigger, then medtech and get a bank behind you, get a consulting firm behind you that can market your case.
You need to have a good LinkedIn. Also worked.
Last question. No? Okay. A last remark from every one of you that you could, something that you think would be helpful to a startup finding the funds.
I can start, and then Vera, the lady, can answer. I would say don't be afraid of M&A. I think if you are a owner of a small company, you need to think what you want, what is your dream. If you want to grow your company, you have multiple ways to do that. Can be a partnership. And sometimes, normally we say M&A is the last solution, meaning you try partnership, you try license, and only M&A is always the last way of get some revenue or just close. But don't be afraid and just go and talk, see what exists out there, and maybe you will get some inspiration. And if you failed at the first, continue trying, because it's not because you failed the first transaction that you see, oh, I don't have success. No, it just was not matched on that time. You just continue to go to the dance floor. Maybe you will find the right partner the next time.
Maybe two thoughts on M&A, Anna. First, Deloitte publishes for the last 15 years or so, we publish an article that is around return on investment. So basically how much you put on R&D and how much you get back. And that continues to show M&A is as normal in the sector for many, many years as R&D itself, right? It's impossible for you to develop your entire portfolio internally, so you will always reach to partnerships or to M&A for acquired portfolio. So M&A is natural in biotech and biopharma. It's one more tool that you have, and the big corps have that. It will continue to be relevant. It has continued to be relevant in the last years, especially when the return on investment of internal R&D went down. You saw M&A picking up to make up for it. Second thing, there's a good read, Synergy Solution. A colleague of mine wrote it a few years ago that talks about how M&A can actually destroy value if you don't do it well, if you don't integrate well, if you don't have the deal rational well carved out. But basically, the conclusion of the book, it's a bit of a spoiler, still worth to read. But the conclusion of the book, and they went through the entire data of acquisitions that they had, especially in the US, public acquisitions. M&A creates a lot of value. Although some acquirers destroy more value in a day that they make the acquisition in the capital markets or in their books in one single day. Overall, M&A creates a lot of value. And most of the times, the value is created for the seller. So that means...
That is true.
That means if you're a seller... Of course, in the long term, as a corporate, you can develop that business, develop that portfolio, you can do much more things. But if you count 2-3 years in line, normally the seller makes more of a buck than the acquirer. And there's actually... The economy creates a lot of value through M&A. It's just the allocation is different and is more biased into the seller side. So if you're a startup or if you're a more mature business biotech, actually it looks good. right? So, but it is a tool, and you need to be careful how you go about the process. As Anna was asking us, and Vera talked a bit about the due diligence efforts, etc.
Yes, my take on M&A is that it's a natural process for a company. Either you license, we always talk about licensing the technology, so you just think about developing, having an IP, and okay, someone else will take it. But it's a good thing if they take you as well. I see M&A as an opportunity to grow, to do things that otherwise you wouldn't do, because you will be integrated, you will grow, and then you will know more about the business, you will know more about the last steps. And why not consider this from the very beginning? So prepare yourself for this. And I go back to my first take on this, because I did do the journey, and it's very hard, but please think very, very careful from the very beginning. Just one example, so we are supporting a startup, and they have something very good, therapeutic, that is very good, but the best solution for the patient is removal. But their medicine, years passed by, and they never thought about this. And one time talking with the doctor, they said, oh, this could make the patients be eligible for surgery. They only thought about that for treatment. They never thought about the patients that weren't eligible for surgery, and their medicine would not treat them, but would make them available to be treated by the one thing that is really effective for that. And this came with one casual conversation. So I cannot stress enough saying this. Put yourself out there. Prepare yourself. Meet key opinion leaders. Ask others to check what you have, so that you would have more options to present yourself, to make a huge market, to make a better presentation for when you are in an M&A situation, because your value will be, I would say, exponentially higher, but could be a bit higher than what you are thinking about. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for all of you for being here until the end, hearing us.